Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud. It's a brand new week. This is what women are actually talking about on Monday, the 13th of October. My name is Holly Wainwright.
I am Amelia Lester.
And I am Jessie Stevens. I have a fun fact before we
good.
start the show today. Did you know? So I've been seeing a pelvic floor physio again.
Oh, good.
To try and sort out the...
This is earlier in the piece than you did
Earlier in
last
the
time.
piece.
She's pregnant, if anyone's wondering, if any Out Louders
Yeah.
are like, why are you so intimate
Yeah.
with whether or not Jessie's seeing someone about her pelvic floor? We've discussed it.
With twins, right? And so I'm going, I don't want a head hanging out at 20 weeks.
Oh.
Let's sort this out. So I went and she was telling me that when you sneeze as a woman, you're meant to pull up. Did you know that? From your pelvic floor. So when you know you're going to sneeze, you're meant to almost like a straw, get your pelvic floor and suck it up through a straw so that you don't let a little bit of wee out. So now it's very pollen-y in the
Yeah, it
in
is.
Sydney at the moment. Everyone's sneezing. So I keep sneezing and I keep trying to do that as I'm
It's
doing
interesting that every sneeze is a little opportunity for self-optimization.
it. Yeah, exactly.
That reminds me, though, that I had a Pilates teacher once who said every woman is always clenching her buttocks. So just think
Yes.
of that. Every time you think of it, unclench.
It's very true. And your buttocks is not your pelvic floor. This is what my
No,
pelvic floor
different
physio
thing.
say. She'd say, let go of your bum. And I'm
Let
like,
go of your bum, Out Louders.
It's making
Hold
me-
on to your bum
Trying
and
to
let go of
separate
it
those
too.
two things is making me all funny in my chair. Anyway, none of that actually made our agenda for today.
No.
What made our agenda for today, Amelia Lester?
Victoria Beckham has a new docu-series on Netflix and she's made some big revelations in there about her complicated relationship with food.
plus, Julia Morris says planes should have a women's only section, and hundreds of women have come forward sharing their own horror stories. Does she have a point?
And Princess Kate has written an essay that's guaranteed to make you squirm in guilty recognition. Please don't tell anyone that I've been looking at paparazzi images because we all, at Mamamia, we do not support the
No.
paparazzi economy.
But Holly, sometimes we see headlines without our own permission. They just pop up out of nowhere, and you can't unsee a headline.
It's not my fault.
Can we agree that every time we look at a paparazzi image unwittingly or without not necessarily by choice, that we work on lifting our pelvic floor? Maybe
Yes!
as a
What a
form
good
of
idea.
So true. A 10-second hold.
Self-optimization.
Yeah.
10-second hold. So I did at least a 30-minute hold this morning because I promise I didn't click through. But anyway, I don't want you to know that I've been looking at paparazzi images, but I have, and I'm sorry, but I have scurrilous gossip from these images. That Katy Perry is definitely on with that Justin Trudeau.
Oh, I love this story
I
so
actually
much.
love this.
We talked about this scurrilous gossip a while ago on Out Loud, and then it was kind of denied by their camps. Like
They
it
went
was-
on a date
yeah,
first.
There was
Oh yeah, and he was like, "Listen, we're just seeing each other as friends.
Just mates.
I'm not romantically interested."
Mate, if you have glimpsed these images, there is nothing platonic about them. They are, I'll tell you so you don't have to look out louder, so you can keep your integrity intact. They are on Katie's yacht off the coast of Santa Barbara, apparently. She's in a swimsuit and he's in jeans, which I have a lot of questions about that. But they are embracing. And although you could argue, well, friends hug each other when they see each other, his hands are in places that friends do not go.
Yeah.
Friends do not put their hands there. So I just want to tell you, this is very exciting. I don't think this is just about Justin trying to get Canada on Katie's next space mission. I don't think it's that. I think they're on, and I'm excited. Scurrilous gossip, I'm here for it.
Things are looking up for Katie. I think Katie's had a rough 12 months.
She has.
She copped a bit, and I think that she's due for a bit of good luck, and I'm just all for it.
Is he a good dude, Amelia? You know things about politics in our side of the world, and he used to be the Prime Minister in Canada.
He's a goodish dude,
What
right?
do we know? Tell me
Everyone in
something.
Canada seems to hate him now for some reason.
I think that's just what happens when you used to be the PM.
I'm very
But
handsome.
wasn't his dad like a notorious sort of celebrity hanger-outer, Holly?
They are definitely a celebrity family, right?
Are
Those
they?
guys. Yeah, definitely.
And what I'm wondering about, off the coast of Santa Barbara, you know where that is, right? Montecito, anyone? I'm wondering,
okay.
because Megan, need I unpack this all for you? Megan is good friends with Justin's ex-wife.
Yes, that's right.
And they have spent summer days together poolside at Meghan and Harry's. I'm wondering, was there an awkward run-in at the Montecito shops?
Oh,
Maybe they were looking out over the water and they had their binoculars.
Well,
and
because
they saw Katie and
because
Justin.
Katie and Orlando lived next door to Meghan and Harry. So it's all
They
very
did.
messy.
Harry once said that Orlando would tip him off about paps in the neighbourhood. I've seen a pap down at IGA. You better watch out. And then you're right, because Meghan has often talked about having the Canadian First Family round. That's when they were together. So hot scandal down at the Montecito pub.
Good that Oprah also lives there to sort it out for them. So there's a new documentary series out, a 3-part documentary on Netflix telling the life story of Victoria Beckham. So you'll remember last year was the David Beckham Netflix documentary. This year it's Victoria's turn. And Holly, you asked me last week if I was enjoying watching it because I just started watching it. And
you watched the first ep before I had seen it.
Yes.
And I was like, is it good? Is it good? Do you like it?
And I said, you know, Holly, I'm finding it really hard to watch. And I recounted a scene in the first episode that has really stayed with me. David and Victoria are swanning around their really marvelously charming looking country house kitchen. And they're about to go out to an event. And one detail I love in this is that they both really like expensive wine, and David had poured them both big, those big rich person goblets of wine to drink before they went to an event, and I guess they didn't have time to drink them. So David pours them into flasks, essentially, to drink in
like
the back of their
cups.
limousine, sippy cups. But then he also says to her, do you want to whisper? There's a little drawer full of chocolate in their kitchen, and it's one of those fun size, I guess, is Whisper a British chocolate?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's kind of like a flake covered in chocolate, but more aero-y. They're delicious. Whispers are delish. Yeah.
So he says to her, do you want to whisper? And then she makes a joke, something along the lines of not having touched chocolate since the 90s. I'm not going to start eating it now. And I just thought this person clearly has a disordered relationship with food. And then that became a theme of the whole show, didn't it?
It did. I was going to say, because that on its own was kind of like, oh yeah, we know. And also there was a lot of footage in that first episode of them at the gym. Did you notice that? Lots of Victoria doing weights, lots of midlife weightlifting. You know how that's what the ladies are into. And I don't know what the protein count in a Whisper is. So like she wouldn't be, I don't think she'd be guzzling those anyway. But in the second episode, in episode 2, so we will have a few spoilers in this, but for people who really want to dive into what we thought of the whole show, we're going to do a special subs-ep about it for tomorrow, for Tuesday. But the thing that I actually found in episode 2, they talk about the food and the diet culture and eating disorders in a more head-on fashion, right? And I actually found it really moving and insightful. And I know there's a lot of criticism about how surface level this show is. And it is. I think certainly compared to the David Beckham documentary, it doesn't feel anywhere near as deep. But Victoria Beckham, posh, or Lady Beckham as the BBC always calls her, which I just love. Go and read some reporting on the BBC website about this show. And even when talking about the most mundane thing like wine sippy cups, they refer to her as Lady Beckham.
She'd love that.
She would love that. Lady Beckham is one of those celebrities who she has been famous for 30 years. She is an absolute icon of Gen X culture in all her different guises. And her skinniness, and I'm just going to say it because I know, and this is part of what we're going to discuss, I know the world we live in now, you're not really meant to talk about that. So we're not meant to say that we don't eat chocolate, and we're not meant to talk about weight or bodies or comment on the fact that Victoria Beckham has been unbelievably thin for 30 years, but she has, right? Watching her talk about that, even you could see how much it pained her to discuss it, I found really insightful because it just spoke to me of a very specific moment in culture and what that does to you over decades. Obviously, an example of that and that level of attention, we're about to play you a grab of Posh, as she was universally known in those days, appearing on a very high-profile television show hosted by a very high-profile host called Chris Evans in 1999, not long after she has had Brooklyn, her baby Brooklyn, who we'll get to in the subs-ep, I'm sure. And she goes on the show and he asks her about her body and her baby weight.
go down the
So
gym
don't
routine.
to be one of those sickening women who didn't have to do anything.
I don't. Actually, a lot of people say, does David help you, sort of work out? But he doesn't.
Or lose weight in other ways.
What way is that then?
I've got no idea. Squat, thrust, circuit training. Is your weight back to normal?
Yeah, it is.
Can I check? Come on.
Oh no, you did this to Jerry, didn't you?
Come on.
No, but Jerry was like really small.
Yeah, but it's all right.
This is horrible.
She only got to number 2. It's all right.
No. Yeah, number 2's great.
Is it all right?
Right,
Number 2?
okay.
You can afford number 2. It's good. Hey, star's not bad at all, is it?
Oh my God. I cannot believe that happened.
And he weighs her in on TV, which was something that people used to do. And then she talks about the impact of the spotlight from being a young dancer all the way through to now on her body and body image. And it's probably the most honest she's ever been about it. This is what she says.
I could control my weight, and I was controlling it in an incredibly unhealthy way. When you have an eating disorder, you become very good at lying. And I was never honest about it with my parents. I never talked about it publicly. It really affects you when you're being told constantly you're not good enough.
So it's a bit ambiguous
It's ambiguous.
about whether or not she is still struggling with that, but she certainly refers to this feeling of inadequacy that has fueled her whole life there.
And yet when she says, I was controlling it in an incredibly unhealthy way, it sounds like it's past tense. And I understand why she puts it into past tense. I think it's a much more palatable way to talk about any sort of mental illness, to have it as an arc which you have overcome.
But I don't think she did do that. I don't think she did that.
I felt as though it was implicit that the only reason she felt at all comfortable with it, because this documentary was about triumph. It was about all the assumptions that had been made about her and her reinventions, and basically look at where I am now. And so it wouldn't have really fit for her to sit there and say, and I still have an eating disorder.
You know what, though? I think that's so interesting because I saw it so differently, because the narrative we would all be really comfortable with would be an explicit one of, and this is, we've seen it a million times, I was struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not struggling now. I now have learned to have a healthy relationship with my body, my image, my food. She didn't say any of that.
She didn't.
And in fact, it is incredibly clear from how much she talked about control, how much she talked about hating, literally hating what she looks like. And this is a woman who's had to look at pictures of herself for 30 years, be stalked by the paparazzi, all those things. It's incredibly clear, really, when you watch this, that she is still incredibly self-conscious. Anytime a camera is pointed at her, she is intensely buttoned up and controlled, even when it's doing a TikTok dance with her daughter. You know, there's a scene where she and Harper do a TikTok dance in their what looks like skyscraper in London.
Apartment, yeah.
Like, she is so steeped in that controlling diet culture of the time. I don't think she's pretending she's free of it.
Flattering is, in fact, her highest compliment. She
Yeah.
says that's why she started a clothing line, is because she wanted to make flattering clothing. But I think why this felt like such a big deal is because, as you say, Holly, we've known Victoria Beckham for 30 years. And there should be actually nothing surprising necessarily about her admitting this. Shocking as it is, it shouldn't be surprising. And yet Hadley Freeman, who's a writer in the UK Times, who herself has written about extensively her own struggles with an eating disorder as a teenager, she points out that we've been looking at Victoria looking this way for years, for decades. And yet somehow we didn't want to see what was obvious. We didn't even want to acknowledge it until she herself said it on this show. And we've got to ask why that is, because we do this all the time when celebrities become half the size that they once were. Ariana Grande, we saw this recently. It was almost like we weren't allowed to talk about it.
It seems like there is something so different about our treatment of any sort of eating disorders, no matter how it manifests in how your body looks. But it seems to be the only mental illness to which we afford barely any empathy. It's a mental illness that we approach with contempt and often anger, of just like, why does she look like that? Impossible beauty standards,
But is that
blah,
why,
blah, blah.
Is that why you're saying that we don't talk about it? Because we just don't regard it as real, maybe?
Yeah,
or we don't
yeah.
regard it as an illness?
And I think also as something that is like endemic to Hollywood. to celebrity culture.
Just the cost of doing business.
Yeah. In that essay, Freeman said as well, why would any celebrity recover from anorexia given how high the rewards now are for extreme thinness? Like it's a game and she's playing it, which sounds like a really callous way to describe it. But it is an illness, but because it's an illness that almost conforms to a standard that society rewards, we just don't want to treat it with any empathy.
Well, because for exactly that reason, because it is a standard that society rewards. But this is the thing, is that my complex feelings about watching Posh talk about that, and I may have been over empathizing because I feel like I know Victoria Beckham when obviously I don't, but she has been so front and center in pop culture for so long. But it's very complicated to think of the fact that someone who is part of the problem. So she was, from in those naughty size 0 years, the pictures of her in tiny little hot pants when she had the big fake boobs, which she also talks about in the show and says, I buried those in Baden-Baden, which was a European Championships where all the wags looked like that. And she was the queen, right? Tiny, like really tiny, tinier than a 7-year-old child tiny, but with the big boobs, tiny hot pants, all those things. That was held up and put everywhere as almost like a warning, but also something you want, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, ooh, yum, yum, ooh. Like that's the vibe. And the thing is that the complicated relationship you have with Posh is that she was part of that problem because she was the pinup, one of the primary pinups. She still is in a way, and this is what I mean about I don't think she was trying to suggest that all her issues with food and body are in the past, because she has not changed even an iota, as in that's still clearly something she works very hard at and considers the height of beauty. So she is part of the problem, but she's also a victim of the problem. And I think that's really confusing to try and hold in your head, because for me there was a really telling bit where because she has literally been followed by paparazzi, as I say, for 3 decades through lots of phases of her life. And there's a telling bit where her and Eva Longoria, because she becomes friends with the Hollywoods when she goes to live in LA when David goes to play for Galaxy. And she and Eva Longoria are being papped when they're out on Mulholland Drive or whatever. And she said, I couldn't believe how relaxed in front of the cameras Eva Longoria was. And this is a time too when she was very thin in the Desperate Housewives size 0 era. But she was like, she didn't seem to care whether she smiled in a way that gave her a double chin or whether she looked. Whereas Posh has been so, I'm going to use a word that might make some people roll their eyes, but like traumatized by that glare and that criticism and that relentless comparison from a very formative young age that she can't just be in the world. And obviously she doesn't, and so she's in awe of people who can, and she clearly is still that way. Because one of the things about this doco, it's quite a shallow doco, as we said. I enjoyed it for lots of reasons we'll get into in the subset, but it was meant to be, as you say, a victorious thing, but also a plucky Vicky, go buy an eyeliner because she's been through some tough times kind of vibe. She is clearly still unbelievably self-conscious about her appearance. Every angle, every shot, and I felt a lot of empathy for her because I think it's complicated.
Yeah, and there were some specifics like she referred to an article that was written 11 days after she gave birth that was basically saying she was still carrying the baby weight. And it also made me think of a few years ago when David Beckham flippantly said in an interview that Victoria had only eaten grilled fish and steamed vegetables since he met her. And it started this big discussion about whether or not that was healthy and whether that was a sign of disordered eating. And are we as a society enabling this by allowing Victoria to exist? I don't know what. I understand why we police our own language in public, because I think that the way that we talk about women's bodies publicly should be different to how we might talk about them privately, because there's more of a responsibility and you don't know who's listening and you don't know what they're going through, and everyone's relationship is really complicated with it. But the idea that Victoria Beckham is being enabled by being allowed to be on television, have a job when she's that thin is
but
bizarre.
We are enabling her.
How?
I think we can all agree that anyone who is struggling with a mental illness deserves empathy. And that, of course, includes people with eating disorders, which are among the deadliest mental illnesses. But stepping back a little bit, like when David said that flippantly, or when Victoria flippantly said, I haven't eaten chocolate since the 90s, that's regarded as charming. That has been her way of talking about food since I can remember her coming onto the public scene. Like whenever she talks about food, it's in that same way as she does in the documentary. Or when David said that about her eating the steamed fish and vegetables, and it kicked off a discourse about whether we should enable that. But it's not normal. It's not healthy to only eat steamed fish and vegetables for your whole life.
No,
So it's not
my
normal
question is, do we expect all the famous people in the world to only present a very well-adjusted front to us at all times? Because I agree with you, Amelia. Like, I agree with you 100%. Like, it
made me feel bad,
This
I guess.
is what Gen X, this is the way that Gen X women have always talked about food, right?
Yeah.
It's never just food. And it's terrible, and I think we're prosecuting that. But my question is it better to edit all that stuff out of it and pretend that Victoria Beckham is healthier than she is when it comes to this stuff? That's my genuine question.
I don't know. I think my problem is not so much with how Victoria Beckham talks about it as so much as what message are we sending when we do reward these women who are clearly have been starving themselves for decades and say that's the way, that's the height of fashion. That's literally, fashion means how everyone wants to look and what is regarded as chic and trendy. We reward them with our money and with our attention, and then we expect our children to not listen to us.
But we reward them and we also relentlessly criticize them.
We reward the culture while at the same time punishing the individuals, which is so cruel.
That's what I was kind of wrestling with when I'm saying she's like part of the problem with the whole I haven't eaten chocolate since the 90s, and also a victim of it in that, like, of course she's like that. And I just wonder, because I agree with you, but there's freedom to me, or there's some honesty to me, I think, when women who are that impossibly thin, which is always held up as desirable, when actually, if we're all being honest, I don't know that it is that desirable to have such an, it's hard to say the words without sounding critical, but such a very, very tiny body shape that clearly you have to restrict yourself so heavily to have. But I guess my point is it better if she pretends that she eats burgers? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely see that question. I guess it just comes back to, look, obviously she's entitled to eat whatever she wants. And if that's steamed fish and vegetables and never any chocolate, that's fine. But it makes me a bit sad. And I also think it's a bit disingenuous to say that she has only been a victim in this. She has been rewarded with immense fame and fortune as a result of starving herself. Now, that's not her problem. That's our problem.
I think she's both. I think that's what's complicated about it. I think she's both. I don't know, personally, I felt sad. Like after episode 2 in particular, I felt really sad, and I was glad about that. I don't want to just watch something that just makes me go, perfect, happy, shiny life, no problems there. Like I liked it.
Before we move on, can I please have everyone's top line thoughts? Because there are going to be people who did their homework. We told them this weekend, your homework is to watch Victoria Beckham. I'll be the first to put my hand up and go, I didn't complete the homework. I didn't. I didn't get through episode 3 yet. I will complete it.
You'll never find out what happens with the fashion show. I just love how the stakes of fashion and sports documentaries, they're both the same. It's like I get so invested in things that actually don't matter very much, and that's wonderful.
See, I disagree that they're the same. A sports doco I will get right into because I feel like the stakes are simple. It's winning or losing. I felt like I was watching an episode of Project Runway, where it was kind of
but
like
without Tim Gunn.
Yes. Or like, will it rain, won't it rain? And I was like, I'm not invested in that, like that much in the rain. And it was, as we predicted, such an explicit, prolonged Victoria Beckham ad that at the end I went, am I more likely to go to victoriabeckham.com and look at a nice frock? Perhaps. I'm sure I would never be able to afford one.
No, are you is the question. Like, do you think that it's going to drive people to buy things with her name on them?
Because when you have created a brand, you want to get your brand story out there. Like it's critical to kind of being front and center of people's purchasing decisions. And this was just a brand story.
Except her brand story was kind of, and nobody bought my clothes and I nearly went bust.
Oh, I think it was people bought them, but I just
spent all the money on silly things.
The money on my plants. But I found it profoundly disappointing, and it was full of platitudes and cliches. And there was a point at which she said this sentence that was like, I'm a control freak, so when things aren't in my control, it's hard. And I was like, I'm out. This is just so boring.
I know that I'm the lone Vicky B defender in this room, but I felt like, because you're right, it wasn't great. It particularly wasn't great in comparison to the Beckham documentary, which was great in every way. It wasn't as deep. It didn't interview all like he had every teammate he's ever had, and we didn't even get the Spice Girls. Like it was very shallow in lots of ways. But in a way, I think that's almost like appropriate for the different ways we treat male and female celebrities, because this was so buttoned up and so like, what will people say? Oh my God, I've got it. Like, I know I've got to be authentic, but I don't want to be authentic. I don't want to say anything that might be controversial, so I'll just drop them like a tiny thing. Whereas David was kind of like, meh, let it all hang out. I think it's very gendered.
If this discussion has brought up any issues for you, we will have some resources in the show notes.
Julia Morris, who's a comedian and a TV host, best known for hosting I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
National treasure.
Yes. She has a proposal. Over the weekend, she posted this idea, which is she thinks planes should have a women's only section with women's only bathrooms. So here is exactly what she posted. She wrote, calling all airlines, please consider a women-only section on your planes. We don't feel safe with men telling us to crawl over them on flights while they ignore women's personal space. And I won't even mention the state of the toilets. Not all men, but why so many? Give us the back section or at least a few rows of female-only seats. Stand up to creeps on flights. Women are over it. And the post attracted lots of likes, but more than 1,600 comments.
Do you think this was like a serious request to the airlines?
I actually do. And it appears that maybe she had recently been on a flight and had a particularly bad experience. But all of these comments came flooding in. I was really interested to see what the consensus was. And generally it was women sharing stories of being assaulted on flights, particularly by men who were inebriated.
Oh my God.
Men making women crawl over them and then kind of making them feel like they didn't have their own personal space, and also women being in a position where they had to breastfeed and they were sandwiched between two men and they felt uncomfortable. I remember last year we talked about an Indian low-cost carrier named Indigo who had just offered a service where female passengers could select a seat where they could sit next to another female passenger. So you could see it when you checked in and you chose your seat, you could go, I want to sit next to a woman. And that was about comfort and safety of women on flights. I am so interested to hear what you think. I've gone back and forth on it. Amelia, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting proposal, and I think that women's only spaces kind of go in and out of fashion depending on maybe the political climate of the times, because back in the 90s, when I was about to go to university, my mum told me that when she was at Sydney University in the 60s, they had a women's only room. And she would spend a lot of time there. And my reaction in the 90s, growing up amidst lad culture, amidst Victoria Beckham being weighed on national television, was immediately like, that's uncool. Why would I strike out on my own and go where only the women are? Because back then it was seen as you had to be able to hang with men, and you had to be able to be comfortable in the company of men and not talk too loudly about being a feminist or wanting to be with other women. And also in the 90s, I remember that I watched a travel show about Tokyo. It was a Clive James travel show, and he talked about how on the Tokyo subway there are women-only cars on the subway. And this blew my 90s mind, because back then, again, there just wasn't this acceptance of the need for women-only spaces for all these sort of big cultural reasons.
Are there still women's-only cars on the subway in Tokyo?
There are, yes. And another harbinger of the times was, the Coogee ladies baths there in Sydney, and they're very beautiful, and they've been a sanctuary for women for over a century. In 1995, a man launched proceedings with the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board saying that he wanted to be able to go to the ladies' baths. Now, he lost the case, but it's a sign of how there really was this backlash then against this idea of women being able to have their own space. And now I think we've come 180, and now I think we're really wanting to create spaces for women. Women are 2/3 of global travelers. There's been a rise in women's only trips and holidays and things like that, and I think we're more aware now of like the psychological safety that can be brought about by being around other women.
Yes, co-sign all that. But is there also a point here at which, and I want to preface this, that obviously the stories there about being groped or, made to feel unsafe in a physical way because some creepy guy basically is sitting next to you. Is there also a place here where we've just become completely intolerant of being around other people who may behave in ways that we don't like? Like, we've often talked about when we're traveling lots for Mamamia Out Loud and we're flying all the time, we often complain or laugh about like that guy who felt entitled enough to snore or spread his legs too wide or talk too loudly or whatever. And there is a point at which we do just have to all rub along, right?
We do, but it's funny you should mention the tour because one of the people who works with us on the tour mentioned that she was on a plane going to one of the shows and a man was looking at hardcore pornography next to her.
See, that is
that's
unacceptable.
Not okay.
But I'm not normally the hashtag not all men, but I just think I'm generally in favor of a co-ed world, right? I think we're all better if we learn to figure out how to hang around with each other. So I don't really like the idea of gender segregating all public spaces. I think that any kind of criminal or creepy behavior should be punished. But if I could sit in a women's only section on a plane, I would not. There's no way I would. Because I'll tell you why. It's where the babies would be. If they put a women's only section on a plane, that is where all the children would go. And although I am because that's just the way the world works and it shouldn't be, but it is. And I am very tolerant of babies and toddlers on planes because I've been there, but I'm not there anymore and I do not want to sit there. And so the men would be loving it. And also the way that Julia suggested it is that the women are at the back. I'm like, no thanks. I want to be at the front, as close to the front as humanly possible.
No, but that's for all the businessmen, Holly.
I don't think so. So I have a lot of sympathy for any woman who's experienced that creepy behaviour. And I did once do 14 hours on a long haul to England with the first leg, sitting next to two enormous bodybuilder guys. Like they were so enormous, these bodybuilder guys with these really big muscly thighs, and they sat with their leg and it was not comfy. But I don't think I would choose a women's only section.
It's funny. Growing up in the 90s, I wonder if that is part of why I bristle a little bit at gender segregation. And maybe I feel as though it's also, why do we need a women's space to allow for men's criminal behavior? Like, if I have sat on a long haul flight next to a man who did very intimate things to himself on that flight.
Oh my God.
And I was stuck by the window. Oh. So my only option was to have crawled over him to what? And it's the same with our the member of our team who saw what was on his phone. You often sit there and you go, well, I don't know if this is a crime. I just don't like it. Maybe it was. I was a young girl at the time. What am I going to do? I'm quite literally trapped.
And also, you're also thinking if a man is prepared to either watch hardcore porn in a public space or be intimate with himself. Or even
softcore porn, actually.
Well, that's true. In a public space, then this is not necessarily a man I'm going to confront.
Yes, and a lot of I found a Reddit thread discussing this, and it was someone asking cabin crew. And a lot of the cabin crew said, for the amount of flights we do not get a lot of reports. And I thought that means very little because I didn't say anything. Our team member didn't say anything. Of course they didn't. Like what you just often don't. You just put up with it. And there's stories in this of women falling asleep and they've woken up and the person next to them is being creepy and it's awful. With all of that said, I think that if that occurs, I would prefer to live in a world where those men are punished and banned from airlines than a world in which we exist in different parts of the plane because we do not trust men to sit beside a woman for a long period of time.
You know where my hypocrisy comes here, actually? You know, I'm saying, I wouldn't. Yeah. If I was booking a flight for my 15-year-old daughter and I had that option, I probably would take the option of having her sit next to a woman. So there is hypocrisy in what I'm saying.
I don't think it's about crime because, Jessie, I take your point. Like if someone is doing a criminal activity, they should be arrested for it. I think it's about comfort. And I think it's okay to want a more comforting experience in the very dehumanizing experience, which is modern airline travel. Yes. Let me give you an example from my own life, which is one time I was on the New York subway, which most definitely does not have women-only cars. And I was very comfortable on the subway and it was sort of my happy place, actually. I love public transport because I feel like it's very anonymous and you can zone out and think about your life, and it's a great opportunity to read. People watch. Interesting choice of phrase. So I was sitting there probably reading my phone or a magazine because this is a few years ago, and just as I got up to get off the train, a man came up to me and he said, "You should know that man over there has been drawing your legs."
Oh.
No, but it wasn't in a good way.
No, I didn't mean the O in a good way. Yeah. Did I sound impressed? An artist. We like those. I'm like, I meant that more like,
I was flaunting my pins, as the Daily Mail was saying. I was wearing my office attire. It wasn't anything risque.
Did you see the drawing?
I didn't see the drawing, but I was really unsettled. Now, it is definitely not illegal to draw someone's legs, but would I have preferred that was not happening while I was in my happy place? Yes, I would have.
And that's the thing, is that it might be one incident in 1,000, but it changes the way you travel.
Right.
It changes the way.
Because then the next time I got on the subway and I was wearing a dress, I was just a little bit conscious of picking a seat that was maybe slightly less visible to the rest of the train car.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a good point, right? Because there's criminal activity, but then there is just the general degradation of airline travel. So, for example, the crawling over someone and having them not move, I was trying to be really honest with myself, and I went, I've had as many women not get up from their seat and have me crawl over them to get to the aisle as I have men. Do I think men leave dirtier bathrooms? No. I think that women leave real dirty bathrooms as well.
It is a bit of a stereotype that if the plane was full of women, it would be so neat and tidy.
I think it's one thing, and I always think that we should extend a particular potentially like a sensitivity to anyone who's had seriously traumatizing experiences where you go, I don't like the idea that then you sit next to two men and you feel threatened or unsafe for 14 hours. I don't like that. But generally speaking, I just go, I was looking around a cafe today and I was like, I like the mixed. I like the co-ed of it all. And I think that having a standard for how we all behave like human beings should just be widely accepted.
I want to hear from Out Louders about whether or not I don't necessarily want to hear all the plane horror stories because it might definitely make me change my mind, but I want to know what you think. Do you think we should have women's only areas on aeroplanes? I have excellent news for type Bs and lazy girls.
Oh, hello.
That's me and you. No, you do not have to make your bed first thing in the morning to have a clear, productive day. In fact, you shouldn't. Jessie, isn't this one of the 12 rules for life that you're meant to get out? Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life. You're meant to get out of bed and immediately make it?
Yeah. So read any self-help. I'm pretty sure it's also Atomic Habits, James Clear. It's any person who's told you how to live your life. Chapter 1 is make your bed.
Holly, did you have a Google News alert for this topic? Do not make bed.
Funnily enough, because I
read overjoyed.
I'm so excited about this. You know why? I'll tell you what I'm talking about, and then I'll tell you why it makes me excited, right? I read a piece in the UK Telegraph this week that was kind of like, it was one of those 12 domestic myths that we must dispel, right? And London-based GP, Dr. Amos Okunkowa, says that you shouldn't because when you sleep, you build up moisture and sweat, and this is even in London, right? It's not that warm there. This warm, humid environment is the perfect breeding ground for microscopic dust mites.
I've always said this.
Yeah.
Always said it.
And so Lindsay Crombie, who's a home expert and author of the 15-Minute Clean, says your best bet is to leave the bed unmade for an hour or 2.
Or 10.
So that it can air out naturally. You can obviously open a window or whatever, fresh air. But the point that what I seized onto with delight was the idea of leaving your bed all mussied up and open, like an open bed.
Because the germs need to fly away. Everyone knows that.
Germs need to fly away, and the clean air needs to come in and do its wishy-washy.
And then to be clear, they're not flying away. They're dehydrating and dying.
There you go.
Won't someone think about the dust mites?
So then you don't have to fly. You don't even have to clean your sheets, is what I hear.
Let's just be clear that by not making your bed, you are leaving these dust mites to die.
I can live with
I
that.
can't extend my limited empathy to dust mites. I mean, what even faces do dust mites have? Do they make little sad faces when you leave them to shrivel? Anyway, I've always, although I do make my bed because I kind of have to because I've read all these things, I never ever did. I obviously wasn't brought up to, right? I've just been brought up with a doona, as we call them in Australia, a duvet, as we call them in England. Like, I just used to get out of bed and whatever state it was in, I'd just walk away from it. And then I had a boyfriend, right? I had a boyfriend in my late 20s who was what we may call a clean freak, but maybe he was just more hygienic. And he was obsessed with it. He was also obsessed with when he took off his clothes when he got home, no matter what state of excitement you were in, he had to fold them up and put them in the corner with his shoes. But he was a lovely guy. But he was obsessed with making the bed. And he said to me, you know, your mind is messy if your bed is messy, all that stuff that you read. And I took it in. So I do make my bed. But when I read this, little 28-year-old me was like,
yeah.
that.
Do you think making the bed is the patriarchy? Because I also never made my bed. It's an instinct. It's in my DNA. I just don't. It's
that out of concern for reducing the humidity in the room and leaving the dust mites?
Letting them fly away. It's always been critical to my understanding of my own hygiene.
They don't have wings. We need to dispel this myth.
Amelia is very concerned about the fact-based nature.
You were thinking of like little butterflies leaving your bed. That's not what's happening.
I like that imagery. And then I met an absolute make your bed guy. Yeah. And the oppression of making your bed is that the last person out of bed must make it. And I happen to be that every single day. So the bed has to get made. I have to do it. I resent it. And when he's away or something, I don't make the bed. And guess what? My life's exactly the same. It's propaganda. It actually doesn't make my life better. Don't make the bed. Do you enjoy making your bed, Amelia?
I do. I love making my bed.
Are you a many cushions person?
Yes, but, you know, if you're in a heterosexual relationship with a man, sometimes the pillows, you have to minimize them. I find they anger men. Not all men.
They do. Yes,
not all men.
But it's also like you have to explain the pillows and it just gets to the point where it's like,
The
never
women's
mind.
area on the plane is going to have a lot of pillows.
Oh, my God. That's actually a big problem.
Friends, I was seduced by a headline today on the internet. Earlier on, I was seduced by some bad paparazzi pictures. Then I was seduced by a headline. Kate Middleton explains a house rule. No phones for the kids. Now, you know me. Any excuse to peer through the palace windows. I am in. I am there. Binoculars on.
Can I also just flag her eldest child is 12. And I just think every parent with a child older than 12 is going, yeah. You got to 12.
You wait.
You wait. You wait, Kate.
What happens when you click on that headline is you go to an essay, like a whole essay, right, called The Power of Human Connection in a Distracted World, which sounds very highfalutin. It is written by Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales in collaboration with Professor Robert Waldinger. And it's all about, and this is not news to anyone who lives in the world, the fact that phones are screwing our attention, and that when it comes to parents and kids and building a connection between little kids and their caregivers, phones are breaking that connection and making sick, unhappy, anxious children. We have been being told this everywhere we look for a while now. She says, our undivided attention is the most precious gift we can give another person, yet increasingly it's the most difficult gift to offer. When we check our phones during conversations, scroll through social media during family dinners, I was like, I don't do that. And I got to feel really smug for 2 minutes. But then, or respond to emails while playing with our children. Damn it. We're not just being distracted. We are withdrawing the basic form of love that human connection requires. Now, that bit, withdrawing the basic form of love that human connection requires, really hit me in the guts. Do you want me to explain why Kate's writing this, or do we just want to go straight into how we feel about this?
I think our feelings are more important.
Okay, feelings first,
Okay.
and then I'll explain what the strategy is here.
Fundamentally, is she absolutely correct in every assumption?
She is 100%
She's totally correct. And she's got the happiness guy explaining why she's correct, and she has all the research and la, la, la. Like, we know.
And la, 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 facts.
Facts. But how does it feel? Well, I had to examine my response because I've got my back up about this. And this is something that I care about a lot in parenting. Like, I think that attention is really, I've heard Hugh van Cuylenberg talk about this anecdote about being at the park and his mother turning to him and saying, "You're missing it." Oh. And he realized that he hadn't looked up, right? And like, what I struggle with a bit with these conversations is that it is easier to place boundaries around your own screen time and your children's screen time when you have nannies, money, and energy, and things that are finite resources that certain privileges allow you. And I don't want to go the whole privilege, the whole blah. I just don't want this to turn into a thing where rich parents finger wag at working parents or at parents with less time.
I agree with you 100%, but in terms of the whole, well, of course it's easy for you, Kate, is, as we've already said, she's not exactly Robinson Crusoe in saying this, right? Like,
exactly.
It's not like she thought, like, so I know what you mean, but this is a message we're getting from all directions,
it is,
right?
And I'm also a little bit worried about the standard of intense engagement and connection and attention that we're expected to have with our children 24/7, right? The parenting verb, I've heard Ezra Klein say the reason so many people have 2 kids is because we cannot parent the way that we are being taught to parent with more than 2 kids. It would be impossible. Like, there's an intensity which we expect of ourselves that no other generation has done. The idea that you would be somewhat distracted while looking after your children is something that has always happened. I do think that there's something about looking at a phone that really zaps connection and all of that. However, if I have a day at home with Luna, and that can be 12 hours of Jessie Luna, the idea that I would be staring into her eyes and intensely playing with her actually isn't good for either of us.
No.
Like,
Never mind not possible.
No, it's not possible. It's like the independent play, the idea that she would toddle off and go and do something and I might pay a bill, or I might check if the library's open, or I might text Luca and say, "Hey, can you pick up some milk?" Like, unfortunately, that is just the way that the world is. And I don't need the narrative in my head, you are part of an epidemic of disconnection every time I do that.
Amelia, do you think that if you're worrying about this, like as Jessie is and many parents are, reading Jonathan Haidt and listening to Princess Kate, that you're probably not doing a shit job? Like, do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And in fact, there have been studies on how much time millennial parents are spending with their kids versus parents of other generations. Not X, don't worry. It's more millennials versus boomers. And they found that millennials are spending way more time with their kids per week than boomers ever did.
Yeah.
So there is evidence that the style of parenting that we are being told to embrace is much more intensive than what previous generations have had to do. They were probably off for a smoke some of the time. The older generations.
And also, you know, just the tropes you think about mothers at home with kids forever, so way before phones, is that she's on the phone to her mom, she's talking to the neighbour over the back fence, she's doing a million things. Like, it's never, I don't think that it used to be, before phones, parents just paid full attention to their children at all times if they were around them, and that distracted parents are a new thing. I mean, of course, this all goes to say, as you've already pointed out, Jessie, we all know that the truth and the facts of what phones have done to our attention. But I think it's like a binary notion that once parents used to pay attention and now they don't.
Yes.
Do you think?
Oh, in fact, I think it's a fallacy. I think there were all sorts of ways that parents were distracted in previous generations that had nothing to do with phones. Look, here's an example from my own life that takes us out of parenting into what phones are doing to our brains in general. I recently subscribed to a print newspaper, and I'm getting it every day of the week. And on my way into work here this morning, I read the print newspaper as opposed to doom scrolling on my phone. And I can tell you that the experience that you have, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but the experience is you finish reading the newspaper, you fold it up, you put it in the recycling. You feel like, A, you know what the news is today, and B, you feel considerably calmer than if you'd been jumping around the internet trying to read the entire internet in a 40-minute commute.
And also you've kind of served a broader plate of things, aren't you, in a way? Because on a homepage you'll click the most salacious headlines and so on, whereas in a newspaper it's kind of everything is there and you've only got that. But back to Kate for a second. So a lot of people obviously have come with the criticism of like, what do you know when you're princess in your palace? Which, fair. But also this is very much Kate's wheelhouse. So as we all know, royals have to pick some causes. And it's tricky. It's kind of like a first lady. Kate's role is very similar to this, right? An American first lady would have to be like, I need some causes so that I look busy, but they can't be controversial.
Yeah.
So they can't be anything that upsets anyone too much, but it needs to look like I'm trying to do good in the world. And when I say that, I don't mean it entirely cynically. I'm sure, of course, they want to, and I'm sure Kate, of course, wants to. And early childhood is her thing. It was published on the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood site, which is Kate's thing, right? So the Royal Foundation, her and Will's, and they pick their stuff. What you will notice if you've been looking at the royal headlines lately is that Kate and William seem to be on a humanisation mission. And again, I don't mean that cynically, but the narrative put across by Prince Harry in particular lately has kind of painted Kate and Will's as like those stuffy, emotionless, like old guard royals. And, you know, over here, me and Megs are like the real people who are like, we're just letting it all hang out. And you'll notice that William lately has made a couple of really strategic decisions. One was to be interviewed by Eugene Levy on a quite random travel show in which he came across very human, very relaxed. And then he also did an interview this weekend because one of his passion projects, of course, is mental health, as is Harry's. And he did a interview this weekend with a woman who had lost her husband to suicide. And it's a very touching, affecting, genuine piece of content when you see it. And I think that both he and Kate are kind of coming up in that, as we know, you know, it's not going to be that long. Probably no one wants to say that out loud, but it's not going to be that long before he's king. And he's setting the table for this is who I really am. And I think he's pushing back on the narrative that they're cold. And the best way for Kate to do that, because her public persona, not unlike Posh, is perfection, control, thinness, no question, but like, you know, always be perfect. But she is clearly a very warm and engaged mother, and she clearly cares a lot about kids. So this is her cause and she's really into it. I think it's tricky though, because anything you say about parenting is inevitably controversial because it pushes all our judgment buttons.
It's just so loaded no matter how much research goes into it. And I think that that's because parents have never taken the job more seriously, and there's never been more advice and bombardment of like, you must do this, you mustn't do that. I think parents are completely overwhelmed. We do, of course, know this to be true, but any sense that we're having a finger wagged at us, I think generates this emotional response. Whereas I compared that to Kate Winslet, who's actually been on the same – she's been banging on with the same message for a really long time and has been part of campaigns. And something about her messaging felt like it was more empowering to parents than it was shamey. And she basically says, you don't have to give your kid a phone. Like, you can hold off. And she's got kids who are now in their early 20s, but she's like, I never gave them a phone. They never got on social media. I just very kind of no bullshit about it. And for some reason, I had more tolerance for that approach than this one maybe.
So since we're talking about the messaging, I want to ask you both about the difference between Kate and William's approach to this subject and Harry and Meghan's, because both of them are talking a lot about the impact of the digital world on young minds.
They are.
But there's a key difference. Kate is talking here about phones in general and digital devices in general, whereas Meghan and Harry have been very explicitly focused on the dangers of social media.
Yeah.
Do you get annoyed about the social media message as well, or is it more just the blanket phone message?
I wonder if it's the more specific the message, the better. I found this really vague.
Yes.
And I also thought, and this is where I guess the privilege discussion goes up, like it's easier if you have a kid who's getting picked up from school, right? There are people with 12-year-olds who their kid has to get 2 buses and a train to and from school, and whether or not they need a phone is sort of dependent on that.
So I'm sorry, but I mean, my kids are teenagers and they have phones. I'm looking forward to the social media ban. I've been on the record as saying that. I think it's a great idea. And it's definitely allowed me to make a decision about my son, who's the younger one, that I feel like I've got
ammunition.
I've got ammunition from the government on that, and I'm stoked about it. But it is very unrealistic. It's great. Like when I know there will be lots of parents who'll hear this and then message and go, I never gave my kids a phone or a screen. But like, what are they doing, these kids who don't have that? Because it's the equivalent now of when I came home from school, I'd watch TV for a bit. I'd watch TV. And I know that phones are different from TV because the short form videos are boiling their minds and everything. But mindless pleasures that involve screens are not new. This is new. And I think it's really great that we're pushing back on the tech bros and all of those things. But it really does, as you point out, Jessie, become a division of like who is supervising their kids at all times and giving them really wholesome, active, improving tasks and activities and classes, because we're also told don't overschedule them, don't be a tiger parent,
Let them get bored.
Yeah, let them get bored, like who is supervising? And that does come back to the privilege. I think it's interesting because I genuinely do think that as we're knowing more and more and more about this impact, in 5 years we will look at phones around kids a bit like we look at smoking around kids. I do think that. I also think, though, that there will be a massive class gap in that situation, because I hear middle-class parents around me say, oh, I'm not going to be strict about drugs or sex or whatever. Like, I mean, obviously not hard drugs, but, I'm not going to be strict about lots of things, but sugar and screens, no. And that is a very sort of classist division that suggests I've got time and resources to do all these things for my children that you lazy people who have other things to do and want to just hand your kid a phone or a screen don't have. It's interesting because I think it's one of those times when where we started with this is we know you're right, we know it's right, but it's going to take a while for us to really figure out what parenting looks like without screens. That is all we've got time for on this Monday Out Louders. A massive thank you to all of you who are here with us to start off the week and hopefully stick with us as we go through it, and to our fabulous team for putting the show together.
Bye.
Bye.